Weddings are supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. A day filled with love, laughter, and memories families cherish forever. But every once in a while, fate steps in with a darkness no one sees coming. In those rare and deeply unsettling moments, a celebration meant to unite two people becomes a scene of chaos and heartbreak, leaving guests traumatized, families broken, and stories that haunt the headlines for years. These aren't just tragedies. They're chilling reminders that even on the most perfect days, horror can strike without a single warning. On the night of September 27, 2023, the Al Haytham Wedding Hall, perched on the edge of Karakosh in Iraq's northern Nineveh province, was alive with celebration. Guests cheered as the bride and groom stepped onto the dance floor for their first dance. Cameras flashed, music played, and fireworks erupted from the floor, an indoor display meant to dazzle and delight. But in an instant, the spectacle turned to horror. Sparks shot upward, hitting the ornate ceiling. Within seconds, flames erupted from the chandelier, spreading with terrifying speed. At first, there was disbelief, then panic. Burning debris rained down, and the cheap, highly flammable plastic panels of the ceiling ignited like tinder. Thick, acrid smoke filled the hall, choking the air. As screams replaced the music, I saw the fireworks climb to the ceiling. The whole hall went up in flames, recalled 17-year-old Rania Wad, who survived with burns to her hand. Others weren't so lucky. The bride and groom escaped, but not unscathed. Both suffered burns, and the devastation reached deep into their families. The bride lost 3 brothers, uncles, and young cousins. The groom lost his mother. A survivor described the scene in disbelief. "I have a friend whose whole family died. His children, his wife, everyone. It's a human catastrophe." The fire began sometime between 10 AS and 10:45 p.m., witnesses said. One of the fireworks hit the roof, a man explained. Everything caught fire and started falling on people's heads. In the chaos, the hall's owner cut the electricity, thinking a short circuit had caused the blaze. But this plunged the hall into darkness, leaving terrified guests disoriented amid smoke, flames, and blocked exits. The building, designed for 500, was packed with nearly double that number, and there were no emergency exits to guide people to safety. Some survived by sheer luck or quick thinking, but many did not. As flames consumed the venue, the roof collapsed, trapping guests beneath the inferno. Firefighters arrived too late. Outside, ambulances raced through the streets, while people gathered at hospitals to donate blood, desperate to save any who could be saved. The official death toll ranged from 107 to 114, with over 150 injured, many suffering severe burns. Children were among the dead. Survivors arrived at hospitals wrapped in bandages, traumatized and in shock. Investigators later confirmed that the hall was lined with highly flammable sandwich panels. A fire safety expert said grimly, "These fires are completely avoidable, but no one ever thinks about it until it's too late." The Iraqi Interior Minister declared the disaster 100% accidental, blaming the fireworks. But negligence, overcrowding, lack of emergency exits, and unsafe building materials turned what might have been a minor accident into an unimaginable tragedy. 14 people were arrested, including the hall owner and those responsible for the fireworks. Several local officials were dismissed. The Prime Minister vowed the harshest punishments. 3 days of national mourning followed. Karakosh, once Iraq's largest Christian town, still recovering from the horrors of ISIS occupation, was now burying entire families. Outside the morgue, mothers wept, grandparents clutched photographs, and survivors tried to make sense of the unthinkable. "I'm waiting for the bodies of my daughter and 3 grandchildren," said Mariam Kader. One man managed to save his grandson but lost his wife in the chaos. Through it all, the bride and groom stood among the ruins, their faces burned, their spirits shattered. For over 100 guests, it was their final night. What began as a celebration of love had been transformed into a human catastrophe, a horrifying reminder of how negligence, greed, and broken systems can turn joy into death in an instant. For many women, a honeymoon is a dream come true, a promise of love and a lifetime together. But for Helga Conrad, it would last only a few hours. On Friday, October 13, 1972, the 19-year-old German bride's life ended in a way so shocking it shook Edinburgh to its core. Helga had eloped with Ernest Dumoulin, a 21-year-old Dutchman, defying her parents' objections to their whirlwind romance. The couple tied the knot at a registry office and moved to a modest lodging house in the Scottish capital, eager to begin their life together. That night, the newlyweds strolled along the cliffs of Salisbury Crags, perhaps imagining a romantic moment beneath the stars. But paradise quickly turned into horror. Hours after exchanging vows, Helga tumbled 100 feet down the cliff and was found lifeless by a passerby. Ernest claimed she had slipped, a tragic accident during a quiet walk. Yet the truth would soon emerge in a series of chilling revelations. The day before their wedding, Ernest had taken out a life insurance policy on Helga worth over $400,000. He attempted to claim the money almost immediately after her death. The accident, it seemed, had been carefully staged, a meticulously planned murder disguised as a tragic mishap. During police investigations, Ernest's web of lies began to unravel. He described the night to officers with disturbingly calm detachment. He had pulled Helga in a way that sent her tumbling over the edge, acting as though it were an accident. Behind his charm and words of love, a cold calculation had taken place. Further inquiry revealed Ernest's murky past as a conman with a history of deception, whose intentions were far from romantic. In court, Ernest continued to deny responsibility, claiming Helga had tried to kill him. But medical evidence told a different story. Helga had not slipped. She had been pushed with considerable force. The life insurance policy, the timing, and his actions painted a damning picture. Ernest Dumoulin was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment, serving 16 years in Sawton Prison. Even in prison, Ernest's story remained unsettling. He later claimed to have found God, studied theology, and eventually became a Protestant minister in Germany, reportedly remarrying. Yet for Helga's family, no redemption could erase the horror of that October night. They placed a memorial at the foot of Salisbury Crags, a quiet testament to a young life stolen far too soon. The plaque reads, "In loving memory of our daughter, Helga Conrad, born 16654, died 131072, buried at Schwerbach, Germany, only 300 yards from her parents' home." Helga's story endures as a chilling reminder that love can mask betrayal, and that even the happiest beginnings can hide a darkness waiting to strike.
The wife of a bridegroom killed on his wedding day has been hospitalized as the family struggles to come to terms with his death.
It was early Monday morning, November 19, 2012, in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Just 6 hours earlier, 33-year-old Navy Sergeant Fabio Jefferson had stood at the altar and married the woman he loved, Giza Guimarães. More than 200 guests had filled the church to witness their vows before moving to a beachside club for the reception. Fabio had spent a full year planning this day. Invitations were sent months in advance. A house for their future had been finished just 1 week earlier. His family had traveled all the way from Manaus in northern Brazil to be there. This was supposed to be the beginning of everything. The ceremony was flawless. Smiles, tears, applause, the kind of joy people remember forever. By the time the celebration moved to the club by the ocean, the atmosphere felt perfect. Music echoed through the night. People danced barefoot on the floor. Drinks were raised, and Fabio moved through the crowd laughing and embracing friends. He was known as responsible, respected, and proud of his service in the Navy, but that night none of that mattered. He wasn't a sergeant. He was just a groom, soaking in one of the happiest moments of his life. As the hours passed, the party refused to slow down. Around 2 a.m., people were still dancing. At some point, Fabio slipped a beer glass into the left pocket of his trousers. No one noticed, no one questioned it. Maybe his hands were full, maybe he was joking. It was a tiny, meaningless action, and no one could have known it would seal his fate. Moments later, Fabio was on the dance floor, playfully fooling around with one of the bridesmaids. Laughter surrounded him. Then, in an instant, he slipped. Maybe someone bumped into him. Maybe his foot caught the wrong angle. It wasn't dramatic, it was just a fall. But when Fabio hit the ground, the glass in his pocket shattered. The sound was barely noticed over the music. What mattered was what came next. A sharp shard of glass sliced into his upper thigh, striking one of the most dangerous places it possibly could. His femoral vein was severed. Blood poured out almost immediately. At first, people were confused. He had been laughing seconds earlier. Then they saw the blood spreading across the floor. Guests rushed to help as others called for medical assistance. Fabio was quickly lifted into a vehicle to be taken to the nearest hospital on Ilha do Governador. Inside the car, everything moved too fast and not fast enough at the same time. Giza struggled to understand what was happening. Just hours earlier, she had become a wife. Now, she was watching her husband fight to stay alive. The bleeding was massive. There was nothing anyone could do to stop it in time. Fabio lost too much blood on the way to the hospital and died before reaching the emergency room. A fall that should have meant nothing had taken his life in minutes. Back at the reception, reality slowly sank in. The joy evaporated, replaced by disbelief and grief. Guests who had been dancing were now crying. Family members who had flown in to celebrate were left shattered. Giza had gone from bride to widow in the span of a single night. One close friend later said Giza was in total shock, repeating the same words over and over again. "I want my husband back." Questions haunted everyone. Why was the glass in his pocket? Why did it break that way? Why did it hit that exact spot? So many small details had aligned in the worst possible way. If just one thing had been different, Fabio would have survived. Fabio's body was prepared to be flown back to Manaus for his funeral. The house he had built for their future stood empty, a painful reminder of the life that was supposed to begin. On the evening of May 24, 2001, the Versailles wedding hall in Talpiot, Jerusalem, shimmered with the energy and excitement that only a wedding can bring. Nearly 700 guests had gathered to celebrate the union of Karen and Asaf Dror, filling the air with laughter, music, and the unmistakable hum of joy. Children weaved through the crowd, their laughter mingling with the melodies from Sarit Haddad's cover of Lev Zehav, while parents and grandparents watched proudly, savoring the moment when generations came together in celebration. The hall was a world unto itself, warm and bright, where love seemed eternal, but in the blink of an eye that world was ripped apart. Without warning, a large portion of the third floor collapsed. The ballroom, once alive with dancing and music, became a scene of terror. Hundreds of guests plunged through the collapsing floors, crashing onto the lower stories with a devastating force that no one could have imagined. Screams pierced the air, mingling with the crashing of debris and the choking dust that filled every corner of the hall. Chaos consumed the space. 23 lives were lost in those terrifying moments, and over 350 people were injured, many critically. Among the fallen were children, elders, and friends who had come together for a night of celebration. The bride, Karen Dror, sustained serious pelvic injuries that required multiple surgeries, while her 80-year-old grandfather was among those killed. The groom, Asaf, survived with only minor injuries, but the happiness of the evening was gone, replaced by grief that would last a lifetime. Rescue efforts were immediate and harrowing. The Home Front Command, alongside specialized search and rescue units, worked tirelessly amid fears that the rest of the building could collapse at any moment. With bare hands, rescuers dug through piles of concrete, metal, and shattered dreams, pulling survivors from the wreckage while the cries of the injured echoed across the hall. Ambulances raced to hospitals, sirens wailing through the streets of Jerusalem as families clung to hope and prayed for news of loved ones. By the time the dust settled, only 3 people had been pulled alive from the ruins. 23 names were etched forever into the memory of the city, a haunting testament to lives lost too soon. Investigations revealed the horrifying truth. This disaster was not a random accident, but the result of human error and negligence. The building had been constructed using the Pal-Call method, a lightweight floor system known to be unsafe. Supportive partitions that had temporarily held up the sagging floors were removed by the owners, and warnings of structural instability were ignored. The combination of flawed design, poor construction, and disregard for safety turned what should have been a night of love and unity into a catastrophic massacre. Eli Ron, the engineer behind the Palcal system, along with the wedding hall's owners and other engineers, were eventually convicted of causing death by negligence, a grim acknowledgement of preventable tragedy. The scars of the Versailles collapse ran deep, not only in the hearts of grieving families but across all of Jerusalem. A memorial garden now stands near the site where the names of the victims are inscribed, a silent reminder of that fateful night when celebration turned to horror. The memory of that evening serves as a stark warning. Even in moments meant to be joyous and sacred, human error and negligence can bring ruin in a heartbeat. The night that should have been filled with music, love, and hope became a nightmare etched into the city's collective memory, a chilling testament to the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of ignoring danger.
There's nothing easy about any of this, let's be honest.
It was meant to be the honeymoon of a lifetime. Now it's a murder investigation.
Mauritius has long been celebrated as a paradise, a haven for honeymooners seeking sun, sea, and romance. Pristine beaches, turquoise waters, and luxury resorts made it the perfect destination for newlyweds eager to escape into blissful isolation. But in January 2011, the island nation's idyllic facade was shattered by a tragedy that sent shockwaves across the globe. Michaela McAreevy, née Hart, a 27-year-old teacher from Northern Ireland, had traveled there with her husband John just 12 days after their wedding. The daughter of Tyrone's legendary Gaelic football manager, Mickey Hart, Michaela was a bright, devoted young woman, beloved by her students and her community. Known for her warmth, faith, and dedication to teaching Irish and religion at St. Patrick's Academy, she had dreamed of this honeymoon as a celebration of love and a brief escape from the pressures of her public life. But paradise would turn to nightmare. On the afternoon of January 10, 2011, Michaela left the couple's hotel room at the Legends Hotel in Grand Gobe to fetch chocolates. She never returned. Minutes later, John made a discovery that would haunt him forever. Michaela's lifeless body, lying in the bath, water still running. Her life violently and abruptly ended. Investigators later determined she had been strangled. The news rippled across Mauritius and the world. This was the first recorded murder of a tourist in the country. Shock and fear spread through what was usually a carefree tourist haven, and international media descended upon the island, desperate for answers to a story that seemed almost unreal. The investigation was immediate and intense. 3 hotel employees were arrested and accused of Michaela's murder, including Avinash Tribhuwoon, Sandeep Munia, and Raj Thikoy. The trial gripped headlines for months. From the outset, the case was marred by controversy. Claims emerged that suspects were subjected to coercion and physical abuse, pressured into confessions that later proved unreliable. Evidence was contradictory, witness accounts conflicted, and forensic examinations, including DNA tests conducted by experts from England, found no trace of the accused at the scene. The investigation seemed as clouded and turbulent as the waters that had surrounded Michaela's final moments. The trial itself dragged on for 8 harrowing weeks. The jury was reminded repeatedly to focus solely on the facts, not the international attention, not the impact on Mauritius's reputation as a tourist destination. After 2 hours of deliberation, the verdict came. The accused were found not guilty. For the McAreevy and Hart families, it was a devastating blow. Justice, it seemed, had slipped through their fingers, leaving grief, frustration, and unanswered questions in its wake. The families publicly expressed their desolation, calling the weeks-long ordeal 7 harrowing weeks that left them with a sense of devastation they could hardly put into words. Michaela's funeral in Ireland was a poignant testament to the life she had lived and the love she had inspired. Thousands attended, from political leaders to sporting icons, including President of Ireland, Mary McAleese, Northern Ireland's First Minister Peter Robinson, and Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness. Her wake was a mixture of profound mourning and quiet admiration for a young woman who had dedicated her life to others, a stark contrast to the brutality of her untimely death. Simultaneously in Mauritius, special masses were held, and the nation grappled with the weight of what had occurred on its shores. In the years that followed, the case never truly closed. Calls for accountability reverberated internationally. The Mauritian government launched multiple inquiries. New investigation teams were set up, and additional evidence was examined, including over 350 DNA samples sent to labs in France. In 2015, the Macarivi family received a settlement from the Legends Hotel, a financial acknowledgement of the tragedy, but one that could never replace Michaela. Even in 2020 and 2021, renewed investigations were launched, coinciding with diplomatic discussions and technical assistance offered by Irish authorities. Rumors and shocking twists continued to surface, including the mysterious death of Raj Thikoi, a former suspect, in 2021 under circumstances still under investigation. Today, more than a decade later, Michaela's murder remains shrouded in mystery. Each unanswered question, every lead that went cold, underscores the fragility of life and how quickly paradise can turn into horror.
Man of her dreams. September 26 of 1999 was to be the day, and when it came, video footage shows her at her happiest, surrounded by loved ones. The day went on and Gladys continued to prepare for her wedding, but while the smile on her face couldn't be contained, her family didn't want to tell her that her former boyfriend, Agustin Garcia, was outside, a man that Gladys had been physically and verbally abused by for years prior.
It was September 26, 1999, in Ridgefield, New Jersey. Everything looked exactly the way a wedding morning should. 39-year-old Gladys Ricard stood in front of her loved ones wearing a white gown. Her mother was there. Her 20-year-old son stood nearby. 9 bridesmaids filled the room, adjusting dresses and holding bouquets as white flowers lined the railings outside. In just a short while, Gladys was supposed to leave for a church in Flushing, New York, where her fiancé, 36-year-old James Preston Jr., was waiting at the altar. She never made it there. Gladys had worked hard to reach this moment. Born in the Dominican Republic, she came to the United States searching for opportunity and stability, building a life as an accountant in New York City. Family and neighbors said she had endured years of struggle and sacrifice, and now, for the first time, she finally seemed at peace. That morning, a neighbor watched her outside, smiling as she took photos with her bridesmaids and waved to people passing by. She looked confident, happy, and ready for a new chapter. What no one realized was that someone else was watching too, someone who refused to accept that she had moved on. 7 years earlier, Gladys had been in a relationship with a man named Agustin Garcia, a 47-year-old Dominican businessman and activist from North Bergen. On the surface, he appeared successful and well-dressed, but those close to Gladys described the relationship as abusive. Her son despised him. About 9 months before her wedding, she ended things and walked away. Not long after, she met James Preston, a man friends said was completely different. With James, Gladys talked about the future, about having more children, about how much this wedding meant to her. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Garcia, however, refused to let go. He continued contacting her, stalking her, and inserting himself into her life. A close friend later said Gladys may have been trying to help him move on or calm him down. Some reports even suggested they crossed paths the weekend before the wedding. Whether out of fear, guilt, or kindness, Garcia remained close and unstable. That afternoon around 4 p.m., the house buzzed with excitement. Then the front door opened, and Agustin Garcia walked in. He was dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase. Calm and confident, he told people he was invited. In the chaos of the moment, no one questioned him. He blended in, moving quietly through the room toward the bride. Then he opened the briefcase. Inside was a revolver. Before anyone could react, Garcia raised the gun and fired directly at Gladys, in front of her family, her son, and her bridesmaids. Screams tore through the house. Her brother rushed him, and the two struggled as more shots rang out. By the time it stopped, Gladys had been shot 3 times. She collapsed to the floor in her wedding dress, the same dress she had been so excited to walk down the aisle in. Guests tackled Garcia and held him down until police arrived. The entire horror was captured on a home video camera. Garcia was arrested at the scene. His defense later claimed he didn't remember what happened, suggesting mental instability or even self-defense, but prosecutors rejected it entirely. Investigators showed that he had stalked Gladys for weeks and arrived fully prepared. He was held on $5 million bail and later sentenced to life in prison. 4 days later, Gladys's wake was held at the Ortiz Funeral Home in Manhattan. Her family made a heartbreaking decision. She was laid to rest wearing her wedding dress. After the services, Gladys was flown back to the Dominican Republic and buried in the country where her life began. But her story did not end there. Her death sparked a movement. A woman named Josie Ashton began walking across multiple states wearing a wedding dress to raise awareness about domestic violence. That act grew into the first College Brides Walk. Every year, hundreds of women put on wedding dresses and march across states and even into the Dominican Republic, carrying Gladys's memory with them.
A horrible story out of Turkey. The president there is blaming ISIS and a suicide bomber as young as 12 years old for a deadly wedding attack.
On the night of August 20th, 2016, a Kurdish wedding in Gaziantep, Turkey, was meant to be a night of joy, music, and celebration. Over 200 guests had gathered for the Henna Night festivities, dancing in the streets near the Syrian border. Laughter and song filled the warm evening air, the kind of happiness that only a wedding can bring. Families had traveled from distant towns, children ran freely among the dancers, and elders watched with pride as generations came together to honor love, tradition, and community. The smell of food, flowers, and perfume mingled in the night air, creating an atmosphere that seemed almost magical. But in a single heartbeat, all of that joy was obliterated. A suicide bomber struck, and the cheerful scene transformed into chaos and horror. The explosion tore through the crowd with merciless force. Bodies were thrown into the air, the scent of smoke, blood, and fear hanging heavy over the streets. Screams of terror filled the night as panic spread among guests who had come to celebrate life, not witness death. Reports later confirmed that at least 57 people had lost their lives, a heartbreaking toll that included 34 children and 13 women. Scores more were injured, many critically, their cries echoing in the streets as emergency responders rushed to help. Among the victims, the groom himself was caught in the blast, though he survived with injuries described as non-life-threatening. The bride mercifully escaped unharmed, but the joy that had filled the evening was replaced by shock, grief, and trauma that would haunt the survivors forever. Authorities quickly pointed to ISIS as the likely perpetrators, and chillingly, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan revealed that the suicide bomber was believed to be only 12 to 14 years old, a child twisted into a weapon of unspeakable violence. Eyewitnesses recalled seeing two suspicious figures near the party just before the explosion, heightening the fear and confusion as investigators worked desperately to piece together the events of that night. This attack was not random. Many of the guests were supporters of the Kurdish People's Democratic Party, HDP, and security analysts suggested that the bombing was a calculated act of revenge against the Kurdish community, carried out in retaliation for ISIS losses in northern Syria. The assault sent shockwaves through Gaziantep, a city already on edge due to the Syrian conflict just across the border. In the aftermath, hundreds of mourners gathered to bury loved ones, the streets lined with sorrow where once music and celebration had prevailed. The grief was collective, suffocating, a deep wound that left an entire community trembling with fear and heartbreak. What should have been a night of unity, joy, and cherished tradition had been transformed into a massacre. Children, families, and friends who had come together to celebrate life were instead confronted with the brutal reality of terror, loss, and devastation. The celebrations meant to mark the start of new beginnings were now forever haunted by death, echoing with memories of screams and the sudden rupture of innocence. In Gaziantep that night, the cruelty of violence pierced even the most sacred human moments, a chilling reminder that joy, happiness, and hope can be extinguished in the blink of an eye, leaving scars that will endure far longer than the fleeting sound of laughter and music. Even years later, survivors and families continue to relive the horror, replaying the terrifying minutes when life shifted from celebration to nightmare. The tragedy of that night serves as a grim testament to the fragility of human joy and the destructive power of hatred, a haunting story that will remain etched in the memory of a city, a nation, and the world. Ben and Catherine Mullaney were a couple with bright futures, bound together not only by love, but by ambition. Ben, a determined and focused young man from East Alifera, Wales, was in his third year of physiotherapy studies, eager to make a difference in the lives of his future patients. Catherine, only a few miles from her husband's childhood home, was training to be a general practitioner, devoted to the care of children as a pediatrician. They had known each other for years, their friendship blossoming into love, and in the summer of 2008, they finally took the step they had both long dreamed of, marriage. On July 12, 2008, under the vaulted ceilings of St. John the Evangelist Church in Silibabil, the couple exchanged vows. The ceremony was bathed in sunlight, filled with laughter and the quiet hope of families who had watched them grow. Friends and loved ones toasted to their union, unaware that only 2 days later, the young couple would board a plane to Antigua, carrying dreams of a honeymoon steeped in romance, adventure, and the carefree joy of newlywed life. Arriving on the island, the Mullineys checked into the Cocos Hotel, a luxury retreat nestled along Antigua's golden sands. The days were spent in bliss, wandering hand in hand along the shoreline, watching sunsets bleed into the horizon, savoring moments of intimacy and laughter. Their futures felt limitless, their love untouchable. But paradise, as it often does, concealed darkness beneath its sun-soaked veneer. On the night of July 26, 2008, the night before they were scheduled to return to Wales, that darkness revealed itself. In the quiet of their luxury cottage, armed men, A.V. Howell and Caniel Martin, forced their way in. What should have been a safe haven became a chamber of terror. Catherine was shot in the head, her life extinguished instantly, her dreams, laughter, and future stolen in a heartbeat. Ben, struck in the neck, was thrown into a desperate fight for survival. Blood soaked the sheets. Fear and disbelief collided in his mind, and yet he clung to consciousness, murmuring, signaling for help as chaos engulfed him. He was airlifted back to Wales, but even the desperate care of doctors, the prayers of his family, and the fragile hope that he might survive could not save him. On August 3, 2008, just a week after his wife had been taken from him, Ben's life slipped away, leaving behind grief too vast for words, and a family shattered by unimaginable loss. The couple, once so full of promise, were gone, victims of senseless violence on a distant shore. The murders sent shockwaves across Antigua, the United Kingdom, and the world. 2 young lives, luminous with ambition and love, were snuffed out in what should have been a paradise of joy. The killers, natives of the island, were eventually captured and tried. Howell and Martin received life sentences for the murders and for a separate attack on a local shopkeeper. Yet, even as justice was served, the shadows of that night lingered over Antigua, haunting its streets, its tourism, and the memories of all who knew Ben and Catherine. The tragedy sparked a diplomatic storm. Britain demanded that Antigua ensure justice, insisting that the death penalty not be applied, a delicate and tense negotiation that highlighted the complexities of justice across borders. Antigua's leadership, balancing outrage and national sovereignty, responded by reforming the legal system. Stop-and-search powers were expanded, surveillance cameras installed, and stricter sentencing laws enacted for violent crimes, particularly those involving firearms. The idyllic beaches now bore the weight of grief and vigilance, a permanent reminder of the Moulinis' fate. The families of Ben and Catherine poured their grief into action, establishing the Moulini Fund to support aspiring British students of medicine and physiotherapy. The Duchess of York lent her patronage, helping ensure that something beautiful, a legacy of learning, service, and hope, would rise from the ruins of tragedy. The couple's funeral, attended by nearly 1,000 mourners, including Sarah, Duchess of York, was a solemn testament to the lives they had lived and the love they had shared, leaving a mark on everyone who knew them. Even years later, the story of Ben and Catherine Moulini resonates with a haunting intensity. It is a tale of love brutally cut short, of innocence destroyed under the tropical sun, and of the fragile illusion that paradise can protect us from the world's darkness.
A wedding that a suicide bomber turned into a massacre. These people are waiting to hear whether their relatives and friends survived.
On the night of August 17, 2019, what should have been a night of joy, laughter, and the celebration of love in Kabul transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. Hundreds of guests had packed into the Dubai City wedding hall, a vibrant mix of Shiite and Sunni families, mostly from the Hazara community, all gathered to witness the union of a young couple full of dreams for the future. The air was alive with music, chatter, and the aroma of wedding feasts, an atmosphere that promised memories to last a lifetime. Children ran through the hall, their laughter mingling with the melodies of musicians playing traditional Afghan tunes. Elders smiled proudly, capturing the moments on cameras and phones, unaware that these would become the last images of a night that was about to be shattered. Just before the ceremony was set to begin, in the men's section near the stage, a suicide bomber struck. The vest he carried, packed with deadly ball bearings, detonated with devastating force, ripping through the crowd in a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly in horror. The joyous music was replaced by screams and panic as people were hurled across the room, families torn apart in a single terrifying instant. Children, the most innocent among them, were caught in the blast, their laughter abruptly silenced, their futures stolen in an act of cruelty that seemed almost incomprehensible. The bride and groom survived physically, but the grief that consumed them, the loss of parents, siblings, and friends, was a wound that no words could heal. Initial reports tallied at least 63 dead and over 180 injured, but in the days that followed, the death toll climbed to 92. Each number represented a life stolen, a family left shattered, a community grappling with trauma that would linger for years. The horror extended beyond the initial blast. ISIS-K claimed responsibility, explicitly stating that the attack targeted the Shiite community. Rumors of a second car bomb outside amplified the panic and fear, as emergency responders raced against time to treat the wounded and secure the area. The Taliban condemned the attack, denying involvement, yet the shadow of terror hung over Kabul like a storm cloud, a grim reminder that even moments meant for joy can be invaded by violence without warning. Afghanistan's president declared a national day of mourning as families, neighbors, and the nation struggled to comprehend the scale of the tragedy. Streets were empty, schools closed, and marketplaces subdued, a collective pause as the country absorbed the loss. For the bride and groom, what should have been the most beautiful day of their lives, the beginning of a shared journey, was forever stained by violence, grief, and loss. Survivors and witnesses were left to carry memories of screams, falling debris, and the terrifying chaos that erupted in an instant. The bombing in Kabul serves as a haunting reminder of the fragility of human happiness. In a single heartbeat, laughter can turn to tears. Music can be replaced by screams, and the most sacred moments can be engulfed by horror. For the families affected, and for a city that bore witness to the atrocity, that night will never be forgotten, a chilling testament to how joy can be eclipsed by terror in the blink of an eye. It was December 4th, 2016, in São Paulo, Brazil, and Rosamir do Nascimento Silva, a 32-year-old bride-to-be, was preparing for the happiest day of her life. Her fiancé, Uderli Damasceno, was waiting at the Recanto Beja floor party buffet, surrounded by 300 guests, decorations perfectly arranged, and the pastor ready to begin the ceremony. Everything was in place for the wedding, but almost no one knew about the dramatic surprise Rosamir had planned. Only 6 people were in on it. She had always dreamed of making a grand entrance by helicopter, and she wanted that moment to be unforgettable, a memory for her groom and the guests alike. She had worked with her wedding organizer, Carlos Eduardo Batista, to make it happen down to the last detail. At 4 p.m., Rosamir arrived at a hangar in Osasco. She was accompanied by her brother, Silvano Nascimento Silva, and photographer Nila Cristina Neas, who was 6 months pregnant, tasked with capturing every second of the dramatic entrance. The helicopter, a Robinson 44 approved to fly until February 2017, was piloted by experienced aviator Peterson Pinheiro. The trip to the venue was supposed to take just 15 minutes. Cameras rolled, recording smiles, laughter, and excitement as Rosemere and her brother gazed out the window, and Neela adjusted her camera. Everything seemed perfect, but around the 21st minute, the sky shifted. Fog rolled in like a silent wall, followed by rain and thick clouds that swallowed the landscape. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. The pilot struggled to locate the party venue just a mile away, but the fog made it impossible to see. The smiles disappeared. Panic set in. An alarm blared inside the cabin. The helicopter shuddered and tilted as the pilot fought desperately to regain control. Screams filled the tiny space. They all knew they were in danger. For nearly 5 minutes, the struggle continued, the aircraft trembling violently as the forest below loomed closer. Investigators later determined the helicopter likely struck a tree in the dense fog. The aircraft plummeted into a forested area near a main road, only a mile from the venue. The cameras continued to record until the moment of impact. 4 lives ended instantly. Rosemere, her brother Silvano, photographer Neela, her unborn child, and the pilot, Peterson Pinheiro. Back at the wedding venue, no one knew what had happened. The organizer called repeatedly, confirming the flight had taken off but never reached its destination. Panic and fear spread as news came that a helicopter had crashed nearby. The truth hit like a thunderbolt. The woman he was about to marry would never walk down the aisle. Fire crews rushed to the scene, but there was no hope. Authorities investigated the wreckage, reviewing video footage, flight logs, and weather reports. The helicopter had been cleared to fly, the pilot experienced, but the sudden fog and rain had created conditions too dangerous to survive. The final conclusion: a collision with a tree during severely reduced visibility.
A criminal complaint filed against the husband of a woman lost at sea. Isabella Hellman disappeared 9 months ago from a boat she shared with her husband.
It was meant to be a dream, a belated honeymoon across the Caribbean, sailing through the turquoise waters of the Bahamas, St. Martin, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. Isabella Hellman, 41, had envisioned it as a romantic escape, a chance to celebrate life and love with her new husband, Louis Bennett, just 3 months after their wedding. But what began as a picturesque adventure on their 37-foot catamaran, Surf into Summer, would soon descend into a nightmare no one could have imagined. In the early hours of May 15, 2017, as the couple sailed near the Bahamas on their way back to Florida, Isabella vanished. Louis Bennett appeared later on a life raft, alone, claiming he had gone to sleep in their cabin and awoke to find the wheel unmanned and the vessel sinking. According to him, Isabella was gone. He said he searched for her, called for help, and eventually abandoned the catamaran, hoping against hope that she might somehow have survived. But investigators saw a different story. The catamaran had been deliberately scuttled. Portholes below the waterline had been opened, and the twin hulls showed signs of damage caused from the inside. Evidence suggested that Isabella's disappearance wasn't a tragic accident. It was a calculated act that ended her life. Adding to the dark portrait, authorities found Bennett in possession of $100,000 worth of coins reportedly stolen from a yacht he had worked on the previous year. For months, he maintained his innocence, insisting he had no idea what had happened to his wife. He traveled from Florida to Cuba, clinging to the hope that Isabella might have been rescued. He even filed in court to have her declared dead, a move that would have given him control over her possessions. But the judge rejected it. Questions swirled, suspicions mounted, and the world began to see Bennett in a new light. A man whose perfect honeymoon mask had slipped to reveal something far more sinister. In November 2018, the truth edged closer. Bennett pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in exchange for murder charges being dropped. By January 2019, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison, a grim punctuation to a tale that had begun as a celebration of love. "Losing my soulmate is the greatest loss I have ever endured," Bennett said, though the words rang hollow against the chilling reality of Isabella's final hours. What was supposed to be paradise became a prison of lies, deception, and tragedy, a honeymoon that no one would ever forget, but for all the wrong reasons.
Richard that day killed 26 people in total.
It was June 26, 1994, in the Naguru neighborhood of Kala, Uganda, and what began as a joyful wedding celebration slowly drifted toward disaster without anyone realizing it. Music played, food was shared, and guests laughed and danced under the night sky, completely unaware that this gathering would soon be remembered as one of the darkest moments in the country's history. Among the guests was Richard Komakech, a private in the Ugandan military police. He had been drinking heavily for hours, growing louder, more aggressive, and increasingly unpredictable as the night went on. At some point during the reception, his attention locked onto a woman named Irene Ati. He approached her and asked her to dance. She refused politely. He asked again and again. Each time, she said no. What should have ended there instead began to draw uneasy looks from nearby guests. Komakech's tone shifted. His persistence turned into pressure, and his frustration became visible. People around them could feel the tension building. Several guests stepped in, placing themselves between him and Irene, telling him firmly to back off and leave her alone. Instead of calming down, he erupted, yelling, arguing, and trying to start fights. The celebration paused as attention turned to him. Finally, the guests made a choice to protect the woman and the wedding itself. They forced Komakech out of the party. For most people, that would have been the end of a humiliating moment, followed by a night of regret in the morning. But this story didn't end there. About 10 minutes passed. The music resumed. Guests tried to shake off the discomfort and return to dancing, believing the danger had passed. Then he came back. This time, there was no shouting, no argument. He returned armed with a semi-automatic rifle. As a military police officer, he had access to weapons, and instead of cooling down, he had gone to retrieve one. Without warning, he raised the gun and aimed directly at Irene Ati, the woman who had rejected him. He pulled the trigger. Her life ended instantly. The first shots shattered the night, and panic exploded through the crowd. People screamed, ran, fell, and grabbed for cover as gunfire tore through the celebration. Moments earlier, these guests had been dancing. Now, they were running for their lives. Komakech continued firing into the crowd, moving through the venue as bodies dropped around him. There was no target anymore, just chaos. 14 people were killed almost immediately. 13 more were critically wounded. The wedding grounds became a scene of horror, littered with the dead and injured. Survivors crying out for help, others frozen in shock. The shooting only ended when Komakech turned the gun on himself. He attempted to take his own life but survived, suffering only facial injuries. He collapsed among the bodies, pretending to be dead, as police arrived to a scene of unimaginable devastation. Officers moved quickly, securing the area and tending to the wounded, and soon realized that Komakech was still alive. As they attempted to take him into custody and shield him from the enraged crowd, grief turned into uncontrollable fury. Irene Adi's father broke through the police line and struck Komakech in the head, killing him on the spot. By the end of the night, 27 people were dead. 26 of them were innocent guests who had come only to celebrate a marriage. 13 survivors were left with life-altering injuries. The community was permanently scarred. A wedding meant to celebrate love became a historic tragedy, and June 26, 1994 was etched into memory not for vows or joy, but for the night a celebration turned into a nightmare.
Now, in news just in, Annie Diwani's family has expressed shock at the decision to grant parole to her killer Zola Tonga. He will be a free man from June, subject to several conditions.
South Africa has long been a magnet for tourists. Its vibrant cities and stunning landscapes drawing honeymooners and travelers from across the globe. But behind its breathtaking vistas lurked a dark reality on average. 46 murders occurred every day in 2010. For Annie Diwani, a 28-year-old Swedish woman of Indian origin, that grim statistic would become all too real. Just 10 days after marrying Shrien Diwani in Mumbai, the newlyweds arrived in Cape Town, dreaming of a romantic honeymoon filled with adventure and intimacy. On November 12, 2010, the couple hired a local taxi driver, Zola Tongo, as a tour guide, exploring the city's streets under the South African sun. What began as a joyful ride through the city turned into a nightmare the following night. Two armed men, Mziwamadoda Kwabe and Zolile Mngeni, hijacked the taxi, ejecting Tongo and Shrien from the vehicle after robbing them of valuables. The couple's planned celebration of love spiraled into terror, with Shrien narrowly escaping with his life, but Annie was not so fortunate. In the early hours of November 14th, she was found dead in the back of the taxi, a single gunshot wound to her neck ending her life in a violent and senseless act. The case ignited international outrage and intense media scrutiny. Initial confessions from the taxi driver, the hijackers, and a hotel receptionist, Monde Mbolombo, claimed that the attack had been an unintentional robbery gone wrong. But soon, the narrative took a darker turn. The men alleged that Annie's murder had been a premeditated hit, supposedly orchestrated by her husband. The allegation sent shockwaves around the world, painting Shrien Dewani as a possible mastermind of a gruesome honeymoon plot, a claim his supporters vehemently denied. Despite the sensational headlines, the physical evidence told a more complex story. Forensic reports indicated that Annie had struggled before her death. Bruising on her inner leg suggested a desperate fight, and the trajectory of the bullet through her hand and neck confirmed she had tried to defend herself. Over the following months, arrests, confessions, and shifting testimonies created a tangled web of suspicion, manipulation, and legal maneuvering. Tongo and Kwabe eventually pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, while Mngeni was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Shrien Dewani, after a protracted extradition and trial, was ultimately acquitted, as no concrete evidence tied him to the murder. Annie's death left a gaping void for her family and friends, her dreams of love and a new life extinguished in an instant. Her body was returned to Sweden, and 6 months later, in accordance with Hindu customs, her ashes were scattered in her favorite part of Vänern Lake near Mariestad, a quiet testament to a life stolen far too soon. Even years later, the story of Annie Dewani's murder remains a haunting reminder of how quickly paradise can collapse into a nightmare. A honeymoon meant to celebrate love and new beginnings became a shocking illustration of the world's cruelty, a violent intersection of fate, crime, and human malice. For her family, the grief has never fully lifted. For the world, it serves as a chilling warning that even in the most beautiful places, danger can lurk where it is least expected.
When masked gunmen launched a brutal assault during a wedding celebration. According to authorities, the 27-year-old bride was fatally shot.
It was supposed to be the happiest night of their lives, a fairy tale wedding in the quiet village of Goutte, southeastern France. Music, laughter, and the scent of flowers filled the air as family and friends celebrated the union of a young couple. The bride, 27 and radiant in her gown, had just said "I do" to her 25-year-old husband. They stepped out into the cool night, arms linked, smiles still bright, surrounded by loved ones, including the groom's sister and a 13-year-old boy believed to be the bride's son. The night seemed perfect, a storybook ending. But in the final moments, as the celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, paradise turned to hell. A car roared down the quiet village road and screeched to a stop. Masked figures jumped out, armed and unhesitating, moving with deadly precision. There was no warning, no hesitation, only the crack of gunfire tearing through the calm. Chaos erupted instantly. Guests scattered. Screams pierced the night, and the festive air was replaced with smoke, terror, and blood. The bride was hit multiple times, collapsing in front of the vehicle that had brought death to their doorstep. Her wedding dress, once a symbol of joy and new beginnings, was soaked in red. Her husband was struck in the chest, fighting for life, while the boy and the groom's sister were caught in the hail of bullets, their cries echoing through the village streets. In a desperate act of survival, the wounded groom leapt behind the wheel of a nearby car, trying to escape the nightmare. With adrenaline and terror fueling him, he slammed into one of the attackers, killing the masked gunman instantly. The body crumpled in the street beside the bride, a grim testament to the sudden, unimaginable violence that had overtaken the night. By the time authorities arrived, the attackers had vanished into the darkness, leaving a scene of carnage and devastation. The bride and the gunman were dead at the scene. The groom, his sister, and the young boy were rushed to nearby hospitals in critical condition, their lives hanging in a delicate balance. Shock gripped the village. Residents looked on in disbelief, struggling to comprehend that a night of love and unity had been shattered in seconds. French authorities immediately launched a full-scale investigation. Prosecutors in Avignon opened a case for murder and attempted murder by an organized gang. Early reports suggested the attack was likely targeted rather than random, with possible links to organized crime or long-standing grudges. Whispers spread quickly. Some sources reported that the groom and his sister had past convictions, including violent offenses, while the bride had no known criminal history. An innocent caught in a storm she could never have anticipated. The Moroccan community in the region, to which the couple reportedly belonged, was left reeling, struggling to reconcile the violence with the joyous occasion that had been intended to mark the start of a new life. As of now, the identities of the attackers remain unknown, and police continue to hunt for the gunman believed to be at large. The serene village of Goult, rarely in the headlines, was thrust into the center of a shocking tragedy, one that raises chilling questions about safety, revenge, and the terrifying reality that even a wedding can become a battlefield in the blink of an eye. It was Thursday, September 25, 2025, in Aswan, Egypt, and 28-year-old Ashraf Abu Hakam was standing in the wedding hall, surrounded by his loved ones. Friends, family, and his new wife were there, the decorations gleaming, music filling the air, and everyone buzzing with excitement. Just a day earlier, the same people had celebrated his engagement. Now he was a husband, ready to start a new life. Those who knew him described Ashraf as endlessly cheerful, full of plans and laughter, the kind of man whose optimism was contagious. Traditional Egyptian weddings are a spectacle of culture and tradition. Henna nights, processions, religious ceremonies, feasts, dancing. Ashraf's wedding had it all. Guests chatted, ate, and laughed as the band played. Then Ashraf and his wife stepped onto the dance floor, each holding a sidesy stick, a wooden pole used in the traditional Tatib dance. It's a dance of heritage, a blend of movement and martial artistry, passed down through generations in Upper Egypt. The sticks spun through the air as the couple moved together, smiling and laughing, their steps fluid and confident. Guests clapped and cheered, and everything seemed perfect. And then, in an instant, it wasn't. As Ashraf spun, he took a step back. Witnesses later said they noticed his expression change, a subtle flicker of unease on his face. Then, suddenly, he swayed and collapsed, falling flat on his back while still holding his wife's hand. Confusion rippled through the hall. At first, some thought he had slipped. Others thought it was a joke. But when he didn't move, panic surged. The music stopped. Screams filled the air. Guests rushed to his side, their joyous celebration transforming into terror in seconds. His wife knelt beside him, desperate and terrified. People shouted for help, tried to wake him, performed CPR, but nothing worked. Minutes stretched like hours. When the medical team arrived, it was already too late. Ashraf had suffered sudden cardiac arrest, and his heart stopped without warning. In moments, a life so full of promise and joy was gone. Ashraf was only 28. 1 second, he was dancing at his wedding, laughing with his bride and friends, and the next, his life was over. Social media erupted with the news. Friends and strangers alike mourned a man remembered for his optimism and warmth. His wife, who had only just become his life partner, was left a widow before they could share their first dance, before they could even cut the wedding cake. The tragedy became even more chilling when people realized a similar heartbreak had occurred just days earlier. On September 13, 2025, 26-year-old Bosnian nurse and influencer Edna Ravcan Omar Begovic collapsed during her wedding in Alija, Bosnia. Rushed to the hospital, she fell into a coma and passed away 2 days later. Like Ashraf, her wedding was supposed to mark the start of a new life, surrounded by family, friends, and celebration. Instead, it became her final hours. Her funeral on September 17th drew hundreds, all stunned by the sudden loss. 2 weddings, 2 young lives, 2 celebrations that ended in unimaginable tragedy within days of each other. Families left in shock, friends left in grief, and couples' dreams of a shared future cut brutally short. Moments that should have been filled with joy became the final memories of their lives, a haunting reminder that sometimes the most beautiful days can turn into the darkest ones in the blink of an eye.